Welcome to CTG Weekly with Mark and Andrei, a weekly podcast where we talk about whatever we want to in games. Today, Andrei and I talk about our newly refound addiction to Magic the Gathering, specifically Commander. Andrei.
Hello.
Hello. Commander, a format for Richard Garfield's Magic the Gathering, even though it doesn't have anything to do with the game anymore.
The cards have certainly something to do with it.
So this is what we're going to talk about this week only. There isn't really an issue in games that we really want to talk about, but we have been spending, yours truly, in the downtime of writing his PhD, has been spending a lot of time looking at spreadsheets and building commander decks and buying a couple. And I'm kind of hooked on Commander.
Yeah. I got my folks to rummage through their basement where I stashed all my Magic cards in like a vacuum sealed box when I moved out 5 years ago. And my mom found this enormous trove of cards that I can't wait to get my hands on because I want to see what's in there.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting. I did that almost a decade ago now with the stuff that was at my mom's old place as well. Not so much good stuff in there. A few things, a few $100 worth, but nothing crazy. But yeah, Commander, how did this happen to us? We were pleasantly enjoying not playing paper Magic for a long time. We were, do drafts on Arena once in a while, typically when a new set comes out, or if the set is good, I dive face first into that thing until I hate myself. But now we've swapped back to that paper life and the Commander table. Why?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I think the reasons why I stopped playing Magic, like paper Magic, are exactly why I'm coming back now. I just feel different about a lot of those things. So when we switched over to Arena, like 3-4 years ago, I felt like paper Magic was prohibitively expensive to me, especially drafting and doing seals for like $30-$40 a pop. I had to get to stores specifically, and I also had some eyesight issues where I would get migraines if I was concentrating too hard for too long on cards.
Mm-hmm.
And so the digital format was at home. It was way cheaper, even if you were like bricking drafts and seals. I felt like it was less expensive, but when we started winning and playing much better, it almost got to the point where it was free for like extended periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I could pick up and put down a couple games. Like I just, I have time for one or two today, or, it's 1 a.m. I feel like I want to play a round right now. I can do that. But the reasons why I left, the prohibitive, the price, and especially like the kind of the table experience, it's kind of why I want to go back now after so many years of the pandemic. And Commander was never a format that Arena acclimated to very well, so I didn't get a chance to experiment with it very much. So it is.
They had Brawl, but only sometimes after it premiered, and I was like, that's weird.
They did, and I don't think we were super in on building our, the Arena economy wasn't super forgiving. And so spending wild cards on cards only for Commander, which wasn't, really reliable, felt like not the best value proposition.
I have a million wild cards. I don't care. I built Brawl decks for sure.
Oh, you're so rich.
But I'm not. I floated even because I just win. Like I win enough. I don't just win. I do brick from time to time. Don't get me wrong. But I've had a couple really good seasons where I don't have to put much in to just play perpetually, and you just
That's fair.
Keep getting cards and stuff. And I think it's a very different economy if you have a different vibe. Which for me, the one thing I wanted to say though is I still find paper Magic to be really expensive. Like it is still kind of like Commander almost more so than Draft. I feel again, like I'm not like an amazing Magic player, but I'm good enough where I win like first or second place in a draft enough times where I feel like I get extra value out of what I'm putting in, right? Like I'm rarely at the bottom of an event. And so I always felt like I was getting cards that I could turn into something else. Like, I mean, 10 years ago ish, I turned all the Magic cards I had into an awesome board game collection because I just wasn't really
Yeah.
using them for anything. Right. And that I think is really a feature, like it is a benefit of paper Magic, where like Arena's value is all internal. You can't sell those back for anything. And at least paper it's weird because you think you're throwing away $15 a week if you draft once a week, but you're not. If you're pulling good cards, which depending on where you draft is easy to do because some players are less experienced and you are familiar with what is worth money, and so you can kind of game that as well. Or if you win more, you tend to get some decent cards in your collection over time, and they have resale value. Some of them, usually you're not making money, but you could foreseeably be like, if you wanted to buy a board game, you could draft a few times and then take the cards from that and then go buy a board game with that on trade at a store. Like it
Yeah.
is a thing you can do. And in Arena, it's all, even though it's cheaper to draft, I think for me, it's definitely cheaper to draft because you can't really infinite. You can sustain, you can tread water without putting more money in, right?
Yeah.
I guess you can go infinite if you never lose, but that is hard to do even if you're really good at the game, I think.
It's almost impossible.
Almost impossible. Yeah. Maybe LSV, but I'm not sure that's even true for him.
No, even they like brick some sometimes.
Yeah.
I will say, because so before we became friends, I didn't do a lot of draft. I mostly did sealed, like pre-releases.
Right.
And I played standard. I played a lot of FNMs, and I played some GPs, and I won't say GP Montreal was the last time I played in GPs. But those were expensive because you were playing standard, and when you're playing standard, you're trying to get multiples of cards that people are building because you don't want to go to a tournament with a subpar deck and just get blown out by an opponent who just has strictly better cards than you.
Yeah.
And so to me, like my experience with standard Magic was like having to re-up decks that cost hundreds of dollars over and over and over again throughout a year or two. And that's why I got tired. And I put away a lot of my cards. And in my head, I thought, well, these things are going to cycle. They're going to rotate into Legacy, where they're not going to be worth much because the old cards that are strong are so incredibly strong. They still are. That hasn't really changed. But Commander has sort of breathed new life into the economy because everybody's decks are sort of Highlander style, 67 or so cards are playables.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the cards that I thought weren't going to accrue value have accrued value. And so I know for a fact that like I have a couple $100 stashed in those boxes because I built, competitive vampire aggro decks back during Zendikar, and those cards have become popular because vampires are popular. For example,
Commander's actually amazing for the secondary economy of the game. Like, I think it's so cool that a lot of older stuff went up in value because Commander became a format that like a really popular format. Like it's surprisingly big to me. Whereas even like 10 years ago, which is when we were kind of fooling around with Commander, like EDH at the time. Was it called Commander at the time? Everyone I was around called it EDH. It wasn't super formal yet, really, at least in the area that we were playing in. Like people played it. It was very casual. And it still is casual, but it's not really. Like it became a lifestyle within Magic, and also the downside of this is that if you're getting into it now and you don't have an enormous collection, or you got rid of some bulk stuff from before that is now worth slightly more because it has found a new home in Commander, the buy-in to this is not super different to a competitive standard deck, honestly. Like the deck size is large. And I think the one benefit though is that you don't need to re-up it often, and you can just kind of hang on to it forever, which is
Yeah.
really cool. Like your standard deck really depreciates. Standard decks don't often translate directly into old like legacy formats, right? Like they don't. Their power levels just often aren't up to par, and so you had this thing that was once super relevant, and it becomes immediately devalued once we reach a certain date, right? And Commander is vastly different. These things just based on their synergies alone, not even their power level. It's just like, do these cards mesh well with a particular
Yeah.
commander, and is it slightly scarce? Will give it
Things.
a premium
Yeah.
value, which is cool. But it means that the value is probably going to hold. Which means if you buy a commander deck, you can probably trade it close to what you paid. You couldn't probably not to a store, you can't sell back, but at least if you want to change your commander, you can probably do some trading and not lose a huge amount of value, which is good.
One of the things that really caught me early on was how to design this, how to design a deck for myself and for my partner that doesn't cost me $1 million. And it's really interesting because I found a couple of easy shortcuts to reducing the cost of entry for folks who are interested in doing it. And also, I discovered something yesterday, which was like my big discovery and allowed me to build a commander I was trying to build, and like cut my budget in half almost, ending up with like a $50 deck, which once I have all my stuff and I can do some trade-ins at the store, likely will not even cost me money. It'll probably be like a lateral trade for me. Do we want to talk about some strategies for just like getting cards?
Well, first I want to actually be like, what the hell is Commander? For anyone
That's
who
fair.
doesn't know what this is, we dove right into that. We're just so excited. This is how hooked we are on Commander. So Commander is a game type for Magic: The Gathering that is different than most other formats. You have 100 cards in your deck. They all have to be unique except for basic lands. So you can only have one copy of any given card, and one of those cards is a legendary creature that is your commander. And it is kind of like you build the identity of your deck around that card, or at least the mechanics, the synergy. You can do it a few ways, which is what makes this format really interesting. And that card doesn't live in your deck. It lives in its own zone called the command zone. And then you can play it from the command zone for its mana cost. If it gets killed, it ends up back in the command zone eventually. And yeah, that's really what it is. And it's a multiplayer format.
Yep.
It's designed that way. There are a lot of effects on cards that affect all opponents that are generally terrible in 1v1 Magic and the way you would normally think of the game. But these cards also get a new life in this format. So you can play from 1 to 4 players. I think you can play more, but it gets kind of
My sense has been that the accepted table is from 2 to 4.
Yeah, 2 to 4,
There are
not 1 to 4. You can play alone if you want, but it's probably not a great
time. There are some exceptions to commanders as well that I think are pretty interesting. So there are some that are like partners. So you actually have like 2 commanders that are a bit smaller. There are some planeswalkers that were printed specifically that these are usually like your big spellcaster cards that are kind of like a player avatar, except that it says like they can be your commander. There are even backgrounds like in D&D. And the one thing we neglected to mention that I think is super important is the cards that you're allowed to play in your deck are determined by the colors present on your commander card, either in the cost to cast them or in the cost to activate abilities. So if you have like a green commander with an ability that uses black mana, your deck could run green or black mana. Conversely, if you run a commander that has no color, you would have to run a colorless deck entirely. And so it creates like these really interesting puzzles of matching color identity to the commander that you want to play and finding things that in regular Magic you could just kind of brute force with dual lands, but Commander forces you into some very interesting like conceptual puzzles about, well, maybe I want to play this like really strong commander, but actually they're in a really funky color combination, so now I have to make some strategic choices or reconceptualize the way I want to play this.
Yeah, you're really trying to build as much as you can around the synergy of what your commander does. And also I think you can build around the like identity of that commander as well. That's a thing that a lot of players do here. And it taps into I mean, if you've never heard of this format, it really taps into like the fighting game or MOBA style where like you have this lead character that you're playing and you're really trying to build everything around like making this thing work or have it support the rest of the deck in a meaningful way. And like there's a lot of identification with the commander, like surprisingly so, where when I started building mine, I was like, I want to play a deck that does this or does this. And then it really went from this is my commander. This is absolutely what my deck
Yeah.
is. Right. And I just settled on decks that like there's so many you can build. And I was just like, what speaks to me? And that was the absolute right choice. I'm so happy with the two I ended up building. And like I am just gonna keep them forever. It's the first time I bought like a really nice case to hold my decks in and stuff too. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm fucking here. I'm here for
No, you're
Commander,
in.
man. I'm in. Hell yeah, I'm in. Plus, the community around Commander seems pretty nice. And you talked a bit about why you left Paper Magic. For me, I when I played for the times when I really played, I had really pleasant draft groups made of really diverse people with open minds and you know very friendly folks. When I got into Magic upon coming back to Canada, I didn't play too much while I was in Japan, but when I got back here, I did want to get back into it and tried a couple local game stores, and honestly, not my vibe. And you know,
Yeah, we went to one or two, right?
yeah, games culture has this problem a little bit where, I mean, you're you may want to participate, but sometimes your participation is made quite hard by some
Yeah.
folks who are very aggressive or rude or phobic of many varieties, and you know it was rough. And but you know I found some spaces since then that are more open to it, and also a lot of our friend group has shown some interest in like, how do I get into this game? And at that point I'm like, well, this seems great. I think I can have a really good
Yeah.
time with this. And I realized I never really wanted to stop playing Paper Magic. I just was like, it is not worth whatever energy is in these environments, right? And you know, there is maybe an argument to be made that maybe I didn't look hard enough for the right place or whatever, but it's tiring, right? It takes a lot of energy, especially when you go to a couple stores and the vibe in any of them is just kind of
And I think
not good.
we also had, we had Arena, you and I, and we hang out together and we played it at work, and so that kind of filled the space that Paper Magic needed. And then we also played Arkham, we played L5R, we played a lot of other paper card games
Yeah.
to sort of have that vibe. But you're totally right. Like I went to this Commander night that I was invited to by two of our colleagues, and I mentioned this a couple podcasts back, but I had a fantastic time. And part of it was that the vibe was just better for teaching. It was much more relaxed and less nitpicky about
Yeah.
specific rules, specific interactions. Like the vibe wasn't that people were there to win no matter what. It was that people were there to have fun no matter what, and that playing the commander was good enough. Winning was like secondary to that. And another one of our colleagues who was getting into the game right now was there not to play but just to hang out. And as the evening went on, they became more and more interested in learning. And I was like, oh, this is the kind of vibe that actually fosters like new Magic players, which is something that,
Yeah, human decency.
yeah, would you know it?
Wouldn't you know it? Yeah, there is honestly that I think is one of the vibes too in a lot of these spaces, even on non-competitive nights, like on pre-release nights. So they're supposed to be a celebration of the new set, low intensity sealed stuff. There are some real like alpha players, right? And it is a thing. And again, I'm good. I'm on the good side of Magic skill level, right? That shit drives me up the wall. Especially when it's
It's not
used as like an
pleasant.
intimidation tactic for players who are getting into the game. Like I've thrown games to kids because it's more fun that way for them. Like on these pre-release events, like I
And
don't
I
make
think
it readable. Like it looks like they won on their own when I have like I'm sitting on a board wipe or something in my hand. But I'm like, what is the gain for me if I blow out this kid's board and he loses and is like really upset versus like, man, take this win, go on to the semifinal or whatever. Like that's a cool experience for you.
yeah.
Like,
I mean,
why
I think
not?
the last I think the last time I played like a pre-release, which was before you and I knew each other. So I think we went to a Kaladesh sealed, I think. But before that, I had played some Return to Ravnica. I can't remember the second set for Return to Ravnica, and I played like a blue mill deck, and I won my sealed, and the person I won against like took their food and slammed it against the register of the store, yelled and stormed out because they didn't win like one extra booster pack at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
Yeah.
And I was like, do I really want to be in this space, be stressed out, feel like people only want me to lose and like not enjoy my time there? I understand being competitive, and I play card games. I play other card games very competitively,
Yeah, yeah, I do too.
but not this. Like this feels like a different. I'm treating this more like a board game night than I am like I'm gonna be like a competitive TCG player.
Yeah, yeah, no, and
And I think that's like
Commander has that
a
feel in general where I mean, that's one of the cool things about building the synergy of the deck and all that is like the magic is just seeing your deck work. Although I do think this applies in other more competitive
and having
situations
some
as
beautiful
well,
cards.
especially like draft night. Like, what in draft night, what are you playing for? You kind of hit the nail on the head. You're playing for an extra pack most of the time. Like, you ain't this. I'm not talking about when you're grinding to get on the fucking pro tour, like when that was a
Yeah, if
thing. Is
you're
that still a thing people do? Because I know that
well,
all got changed around. I'm not
I,
au courant on the competitive
long
magic scene, but
long story short, competitive Magic has had a rough couple of years for sustaining people who are not at the level of like Louis Scott Vargas or like Newmont or
yeah,
players of that caliber. But now there are Magic Opens, and if you open up Magic Arena and you see like there are now packs that give you entry tickets for Magic Opens that are like draft and sealed based. So I think they're trying to bring back some sort of competitive like I want to say circuit where you can actually like spend a lot of time and make money doing that if you're
mm-hmm,
extremely
mm-hmm.
good. But it's not where it was when you and I were teenagers, where people like Frank Karsten would get like paid $1,500 a weekend to just go participate in a GP in a different country,
Right.
and they were like celebrities within the community. I think it's a bit more tempered than that, and we're in a transition period. And I think actually the popularity of Commander is really interesting because one of the things that we haven't talked about before we move on to like the nitty gritty of what we want to play and how we're
Mm-hmm.
building
Yeah, yeah.
is that this wasn't a company sponsored format originally. Like this was a player led community development that I think came along with things like Two Headed Giant and Emperor Magic, and there were a lot of like different formats that people were fiddling with for years before Commander took root. And then over time, Commander became more and more popular to the extent that my understanding is that now Commander is the bulk of Magic sales. Like
I don't
it's
doubt
people
it.
buying for Commander decks.
It's so addictive. Like, again, it builds on all that MOBA language that we're used to right now. That
I want to
hero,
main a deck. Yeah.
yeah, you main it, and like feels good to build one. Like it really does. This is like I have not had this much fun like making a deck of
Yeah.
anything in a really long time.
And I very much enjoy. So one of the traditional ways of building a Magic deck is around a tribal theme. So you favor a creature subtype like elves or goblins or soldiers or what have you, and I really like that kind of building. So for me, if I open like a spreadsheet and I see like which elves exist, what color they are, then I'm like, oh, okay, how do I build around this? Like, what kind of strategy am I generating mana for a different win condition? There's like so many things, even within what feels like a settled archetype. And yeah, I'm You can't see it, but I have a big smile on my face because I'm just thinking about the fact that like soon I'm gonna get to have my own. This is the other
Yeah,
part
it's
that's
really
like really
pleasant.
nice for people. Everybody's like, I'll loan you my commander deck if you don't have the money to play. Like there are a lot of people who have two, three, four, and they're like, I don't need to play them all at the same time. So if somebody wants to come by and try one out, you know, that part also like
Hmm.
is really good, especially for players who have like lower price points
There's also, you
and are
know,
scared.
there's kind of something really special in the way a commander game plays out compared to draft or standard, or really any of the other constructed formats, where like your deck generally has like two modes, trying to get to one mode of executing what your deck does. And like at a high level of draft, you kind of you know all your cards that are in there. You're keeping track of what's in your hand, what's in your library, how many lands are out, what the odds are that you draw something good. You're doing all of this stuff. You're trying to get your deck to do what you want it to do, right? Like that's what that is. And you're trying to do that with Commander. But the magic of Commander is that your Commander is always a force in this deck, but the 7 cards that you draw at the start are so wildly different every time that your game plan is always a little weird. Like there's always a mini
Oh,
game that you're playing about like what is the synergy I have today in this game of Commander off the bat. Like I know what my commander does and I know what I'm trying to get them to do, but with this set, how what do I do? Like how do I actually get there? And I think that's so neat because like if you draw a bunch of hands of Commander out of a single deck, odds are that each time you're not playing it out the exact same way.
no.
That's really cool for me because I really I have a hard time with prescriptive play and like doing. That's why I like draft so much. Is I do my 7 games with a deck and I build something new, right? Like that's way more fun. I never really enjoyed standard because my deck was always really, I want this to be piloted the way it's supposed to be piloted. Go
Yeah.
and grind out 500 games with this deck. That is not interesting to me at all. I really like the exploration of like what do I do in this particular situation with my deck. Like that, it's so neat.
On the topic of prescriptive play, which I think is a fantastic segue for us to talk about, is one thing that I've been trying to navigate coming into Commander, which is like what a lot of people call Rule Zero, or preemptive restrictions on what is cool to bring to a table and what is not, which I think is really interesting and kind of unique to Commander. But it's something that people have been doing ad hoc for years, where they're like, don't bring your like $500 deck to stomp everyone who's built with like a $35 budget.
Yeah.
But there are certain strategies and archetypes that exist in Commander which are sort of considered not kosher. And I find this like really interesting. So, for listeners who uh, do not know us by this point, Mark tends to play on the blue-black spectrum of Magic, slower control
White as
decks that
well.
have a lot of
I'm in.
white
I'm
as
in
well.
white, blue, black. I am in the Esper area in some combination. This is what I do.
It's fair.
Yeah.
So very value oriented, a lot of controlling the board, controlling people's hands, counterspelling. And I tend to be completely on the opposite of that. For a very, very long time, I was only a red player. I think depending on what month you catch me, I'm either in red, white, green or black, white, green. So if I want to play faster or slower, but I enjoy board centric strategies most. I think for me, I like having cool creatures. So Commander appeals to me because I do want to have a ginormous commander that will kill someone. But one of the interesting things is, for example, I was perusing the subreddit and I found somebody discussing a table where they felt like they couldn't play the deck they wanted because the table had banned blue entirely as a color.
I'm not welcome.
Which, yeah, I was like, this seems a bit intensive. But at the same time, I was watching some other podcasts by people like the Commander Zone, Command Zone, Commander Zone. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember. And they were talking about how, for example, certain strategies are viewed as spiteful or not very productive and kind of unwelcoming.
Some
So
strategies are spiteful and unwelcoming.
it's true. Like,
They're not
um,
viewed as, they are.
my preferred kind of control, which is mass land destruction, which I have learned is a big no-no, and I'm trying to not do it. I have seen people talking about the fact that, for example, if you do mass land destruction to support a win condition, like it's not just to be land destruction, it's more acceptable. But if somebody is
Symmetrical
like,
is also a bit more okay, but still annoying.
yeah, but it's like, oh, we're on turn 6. I'm just going to destroy all of our lands and we start again because my commander costs like 10 mana and yours doesn't, or like that. Symmetrical creature sacrificing stacks from the card Smokestacks is considered like pretty brutal. And there's sort of this thing of people want to be able to play the commander, and if you're somebody who's sitting on a lot of counterspells or removal, you might be viewed as like inhospitable to that, which I find like really interesting because
This to me is where it gets weird, because if you're playing the game, like, I understand that you wanting to play your commander and keep your commander out is the thing you want to do. Why is it the thing you want to do? Because that's the thing that gets you to win the game. So if you're playing the game as an opponent, it would make sense that you want the commander off the board.
I agree with you,
It's
and I think there are. I think my rule of thumb from everything I've read and talking to our colleagues that we're planning to play with is sort of like, if you are doing something purely to be spiteful to the people at your table or to troll them, that's bad. But if you're doing it because that's the pace that your deck is built to win at, then that works. There are some fringe cases too. So things like Infect and Mill, a lot of people don't like. But from what I've seen, the sort of settlement on that is like Infect is really one of the premier affordable and viable forms of aggro.
And I mean, they
Commander.
just made a precon with that
Yeah.
as a theme. So like, clearly with Wizards of the Coast, well, can we really go with Wizards of the Coast judgment on anything given recent events? But they did print one, so clearly they think it's okay, right? Yeah.
There's a whole thing. I just think it's really interesting because no two tables are the same, and I think there's probably a regression to the mean where like most tables are going to have similar rulings, but you might end up at like a really intense fringe table where people think that like board wipes, spells that destroy multiple creatures or enchantments or anything, are considered like not good form.
You need board wipes.
And this is one of the interesting things is like, well, if you remove these kinds of pieces of play, then the entire sort of combo control aggro triangle, like the rock, paper, scissors of traditional card games, kind of falls apart, because if you don't have viable aggro because Infect isn't played, then combo decks are much stronger because they don't have to fear being greedy.
Yeah, if you get rid of board wipes, token decks run out of control, and there's literally nothing you can do. Like, I do think
a healthy medium.
Yeah, a healthy medium is really important, and I think it is, like, with the way this is, like, discuss with your table, because like the game compared to like a board game is not highly regulated by its rule set in the same way. Like, if every card is an amendment to the rules of Magic, which they are, and you think about how many cards are possible to play in Commander, you really do need to have a discussion with the group you're playing with about like what are we looking for here. Honestly, although again, there is a thing where if you're unfamiliar with a table and you sit down with your Commander deck, there may also be a kind of disingenuous, like, oh, you're doing that just because they don't like that play style. Like, there are players who really love their colors and hate what the other colors do down to their bones, even though all of them need to exist for the game to function. Like, I ain't gonna jam on you with a red deck that kills you in 3 turns, but if someone's doing that to me, that's part of the game, and I should have an answer for that. Like,
you do need a good, honest red deck that forces you to not be greedy, so long as it runs out of gas.
Yeah, and then
which I think is the other thing.
Don't be upset when I cast removal from your graveyard in the top of your deck, and I take all your creatures. Like, just,
Mm.
it's a thing. If you don't want that to happen, your goblin better kill me in 3 turns. Like,
I
I'm
feel like
just
we're having a
saying.
conversation about future events.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying right now.
That's not what I built, so it's fine.
Yeah, so I guess
But
as we end this, I think we should talk about what did we build here? What are we playing with? Because I think that's a really interesting place to end in terms of like I already have an emotional attachment to these decks, which is so weird to say, but I
same.
do. Like I'm gonna order custom tokens. I'm just gonna have these forever.
Who wants this? Do I start?
So
Do
I
you
have
want to start?
two. I have two different decks. So I'll start. You do yours, and then I'll end with the one that's like the main deck that I built from scratch. Uh, the first one I built is a modified precon off one of the Baldur's Gate pre-constructed decks called Party Time, and I bought it because the precons are generally, this isn't totally true, but like compared to something you can build from nothing, in power level wise, they tend to be much closer together. And so I built this one, and I'm going to slightly modify it to perform better, but not to an extreme degree, like a very minor upgrades to just make the thing work slightly better. And this is the deck I would play with folks who are looking for like more of a freeform casual commander experience. And what is the goal of this? So it's built on the party system, which is, rogue, warrior, cleric. What am I missing? Wizard. And the idea is, what does this deck want to do? It wants to get one of each of them out on the battlefield, and then once you have your party assembled, your party constantly is buffed by the commander. And the commander can also look at the top of the deck and play any one of those creature types from the top of the deck. So that's the goal. It's not a crazy combo. It's just fun. It's the whole deck is a fun mini game, and I think that is at its heart what Commander, when it feels its coolest, when your deck is like, the theme is here and I'm playing the theme and it can win and it's not abusive to the other players at the table. Like, no one's going to feel
Right.
beset upon by this deck. It takes time to ramp up. It's easy to break the combo down, but when it does happen, it will win the game, and that feels good, right?
Right.
Also, the commander is amazing. She's a really cool rogue, and I got the full art card. She's badass. This is so good.
Sick.
Yeah, I'm happy.
So I built two theoretically, but I'll talk about one very shortly and then the bigger one. So for my partner who is learning to play Magic and has been sort of activated by all of this discussion of Commander in our friend groups, I built a mono black aggro to mid-range vampire that scales off of dealing combat damage. So not like aristocrats where like your creatures die and you drain life, or like red-black vampires. Just like a very straightforward, slightly slower aggro deck that kind of accrues value over time, and just like thematically is built around having cool vampires, which was a requirement, was that the deck also be aesthetic because, and I quote, "Goblins are ugly and I don't want to play them."
Yeah.
Which was the thing.
Some of them
However,
are cute.
what you recommended to me in a very Marie Kondo way was that the commander should spark joy. And so I kept trying to build all these like commanders. And I had one in the back of my mind. It's called Haktos the Unscarred, who is a sort of adaptation of Achilles that appears in my PhD work. And I was like, yeah, this would be fitting if I could include a thing that I've been writing about as a thing I play. And he's red-white, and he's a very simple commander. He's a 6/1. Now, when he comes into play, you roll, you randomize between 2, 3, and 4, probably with a dice. And whatever mana cost you roll is his Achilles heel, and everything else he has protection from. And he has to attack each turn if able. And so for a long time, I was trying to figure out how to build this, and I was being very combo-y. But in my desire to reduce the price, I've decided to build Achilles on the idea of immunity. And so I'm going to be running a fair amount of board wipes that are scalable with X cost, so I can kill everything that isn't his exact mana cost, while continuing to uh, beat people up with him. And the sort of second speed of this is cards that give you extra combat phases or additional turns, but you lose if you're at the end of that turn.
Right.
And so you can like find, a moment of victory when people are tapped out or some stuff. So I did want some of the extra turn stuff, but without it being toxic and being like I'm taking 8 extra turns or something. Just like, well, I'm gonna lose imminently, but maybe I can score a victory from like this very weird position.
Right.
And I'm just really excited. I have a lot of cards. He sort of has a weird samurai sub theme because samurais are in red white, and so they work. So my headcanon is that Achilles went to Japan for some reason.
Because, well, technically he was in that Bullet Train movie recently.
Yeah, that's factual.
We are lions.
That picture is in my dissertation. Actually,
with the "We Are Lions" picture.
There are no negotiations between lions and men.
Yeah. Yes. That is a terrible, infinitely quotable movie with one of the best duels in it all time. I still watch that duel like once every 6 months, and I'm just like, damn.
Rest of the movie not so good.
Rest
but there
of
are
the
a couple
movie
scenes.
is rough, but that fight scene is awesome. And "We Are Lions" is a meme, but it is.
The beach scene is pretty cool too.
Yeah, I think the beginning works fairly well. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Troy.
Suddenly, Troy.
A wild Troy appeared.
What's your final deck, which you are going to play right after we record?
Yes. No, I'm not going to play this one. I'm teaching another player, and I'm going to play. I bought a third precon that I'm not touching at all. That is just supposed to be at like a mid power level to teach with. This one is Tasha the Witch Queen, and she's blue black, and she is also fucking fabulous. And the theme of this deck is I play your spells. So I didn't want to do a ton of mind control because I understand why that would be super annoying. There is a little bit of mill in here just to fuel some of the I can cast cards from your graveyard thing that it does. But a lot of this deck is built around like I basically just play your best cards if I catch them. And so it's not OP. It's really just trying to play with the top of your opponent's decks to get some options for cards to cast from your opponent's graveyards. And you end up playing like their best things to beat them down with, right? Like that's what this deck is. Because I always love those effects in draft when they're viable. And there's usually only like per set 1 or 2 cards that actually do this. And I always gravitate to those when I can, and they're not good. Like they're okay. Like I don't think this deck is amazing, but the fact that you can build around that and the whole strategy is like, I'm just going to take every card in the game that does this kind of thing, along with, some bounce so that I don't get run over. Cause it does take a lot of time to set up this deck. But yeah, that's what it does. It's just, Witch Queen. And she also makes a demon whenever you cast a spell that's not your own. So you can do a little bit of punchy and a little bit of blocky with her.
When you know how I know this is a good commander deck for you? Because when you said Tasha the Witch Queen, my eyes rolled back into my head because it is like, you never talk to me about it, but it is the most you commander I could imagine of all of the commanders I've seen in recent years.
No, she's 100% made for me as both a person and a player. It's like exactly correct. There's no white in the deck though. Like she is blue black strictly, and I am very firmly an Esper player. I'm so much an Esper player that is the blue black white combo. The what do you call it? The shard. Here's how much an Esper player I am. I've heard the names of the other shards so many times. I cannot remember any of them or what combination of colors they're referring to. I know all the 2-color pairs from Ravnica, but despite playing this since Shards of Alara, I only know the one like by heart. The other ones I'm like, I don't know what these are. Like tell me what 3 colors they are still.
That's fair. I think the weird part with me is I'm a white red green player most of the time, like a Naya player most of the time, but I tend to not play 3-color. I tend to play the 2-color subvariants, like red
Yeah.
green, white green, and red
Yeah,
and red white.
that's what I'm doing here. It's a white black deck and then a blue black deck.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do love me some Esper. Has the best name too.
Yeah, my preferred shards aren't Abzan. Nobody likes
The
Abzan.
name is terrible.
White black.
Esper's great because you
white,
got
black,
the
green.
reference to Final Fantasy VI in it too. Like it just resonance. Mark Rosewater can tell you. Anyway.
Oh, why am I not playing Commander right now?
Yeah, well, soon enough there will be lots of opportunities for Commander in our lives because we will have functional Commander decks. Some of my components are still coming in the mail, but they will arrive shortly, and it will be great. Is there anything else you wanted to say about Commander? We said we were going to go short, and then we didn't because we just lacked the capacity to be succinct after years in the academy.
Accurate. We'll probably talk about it more as we get into it. One of the things that we didn't talk about today is, I think, tools and strategies for reducing cost, which is, I think, something we can return to in the future, especially for people who are interested in trying it out. But, by that time, we'll know more about it.
Yeah, so. I mean, you can also just, don't buy premium cards like I did for the decks that I ordered. You don't have to do that.
Where's the fun in that, though?
Yeah, no, my deck looks nice. Anyway, CTG Weekly Commander.
Let's go.
We did the thing. See you next week.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.